right, we are back again with another episode with Babe over here, and we're going to be talking about Conshelf 1. Now, I know Babe's been doing some hard work on getting these videos ready for us and this information to us, so without further ado, what do you got, Babe?
Well, as you said, we're here to talk about Conshelf because if anyone doesn't know, there was 3 different Conshelf projects that were actually done. So the first one is Conshelf 1. Now, Conshelf is short for Continental Shelf Station, and that is what Jacques Cousteau, he's the one that headed up these Conshelf projects, and so the full term is Continental Shelf Station. Everyone calls them Conshelf 1, 2, and 3 for short. So Conshelf 1, the project were experiments developed by Jacques Cousteau to prove the ability of humans to live and work underwater. These projects helped lay the foundation for modern-day commercial divers, astronaut training. There were environmental underwater experiments as well as human, physiological, and psychological experiments performed during these projects that the results are still used today. So just like we were talking about Tectite, is a very similar thing. And when we get to Sea Lab, it'll be the same thing. Everybody kind of had their hands in, getting scientists in there to study different aspects of how humans are going to react physically and physiologically or psychologically to being living underwater. So the Conshelf 1 station was sunk 32 feet in the Mediterranean Sea. And it was sunk 32 feet on purpose because Jacques Cousteau knew 33 feet, you've hit 1 atmosphere. So they kept that at that 10-meter mark, just above the 10-meter mark, to keep from doing another atmosphere.
He was like pushing the envelope right there on that 1 atmosphere. I mean,
exactly.
He wasn't, like the Joules and stuff is, sitting at around 27, but he's like, I'm gonna push it right to the edge.
Yep. Because they were trying to prove something, and they did because, well, I'll get to that in a minute. The guys who stayed there, they stayed for 7 days in this underwater habitat, and it was Albert Falco and Claude Wesley. They lived there a week in 1962. They were called oceanauts then, and that's what we call aquanauts now.
Now, I'll tell you while you're looking there, the one thing I like, because maybe off the subject a little here, but talking about 1 is, I don't think 1 gets enough love. Everybody wants to focus on 2 and 3 because they're bigger and they're more cool. But the one thing I like about 1 is it was smaller. It was that foundation. And, as someone who's working to build an underwater habitat, you got to have that first one, that baby, that foundation. And that's kind of what that 1 is. And that's what, so it may not be the best looking underwater habitat, but it was that first step that really set the foundation for all the other ones that have come since it. All the Conshelfs, all the Aquarius, Sea Labs, everything. So, it needs a little bit more respect. So, sorry to cut in there. I just want to put that out there.
No, because you say that, and the one, Edwin Link had done Man in the Sea right before Cousteau started this. So 4 days before Cousteau started Conshelf, Man in the Sea had ended 4 days before. And I'm trying to remember, but Man in the Sea, I'll probably do a short one of these on that too. But Man in the Sea, it was small. It was tiny. It was much smaller than Conshelf 1 was. And it was supposed to have someone stay, but I think they stayed 24 hours, I believe is all it was, and Man in the Sea, just to prove it could be done. So again, Cousteau was looking at that, and Edwin Lincoln Cousteau had actually talked beforehand, and everyone thought they were going to work together, and I've never found what was actually said that they didn't. So they both went their separate ways and did their own thing, and this is what we end up with Man in the Sea, with Link, and the Conshelf projects with Cousteau. If I remember right, Edwin Link was a multi-millionaire, and he was funding it all himself, if I remember correctly. Where Cousteau, of course, had the backing of all the oil, gas, and some government help and stuff. So there was a big difference there for that too.
Yeah, absolutely.
But then this is where we get our term aquanaut from too. Is it would have been oceanaut then. So astronauts are stars. So at some point, I don't know why. I'm going to have to look it up now.
Yeah.
But why was it changed from oceanaut to aquanaut?
Right.
I don't know. Unless it's to cover freshwater as well as ocean water.
And before, back when I was younger and I was watching the PBS specials and so on, one thing I always remembered, aquanauts were the yellow helmets with the tanks all enclosed in that big yellow, in all yellow suits. I mean, it was like the coolest thing ever. It's like, I want that. I kept on telling my,
had that headlight right there.
I want that. And then you even look at like G.I. Joe, that their scuba divers were inspired by that too and stuff. That, it was the Deep Six or was wetsuit. He had a similar setup. So yeah.
So, I know we'll talk about it later, but I believe Conshelf 3 had its own. I think didn't they all wear silver? Like silver.
Maybe.
Everything was silver.
Over silver, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, if I remember right. Because Conshelf 2, it was black with yellow striping.
Okay.
On it. I remember that. But yeah. So the habitat the two men stayed in was, we were talking about size. So it was just under 17 feet long, 5 meters, and it was 2.5 meters wide, so about 8 foot wide. It was just a little over 8 foot wide. And that makes me think of the habitats you're wanting to make.
Right.
Because length, I'm guessing 20, 40 foot. I'm not sure which ones you're wanting to go with.
Right.
But that's roughly the same size.
Yeah.
It's going to be longer.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing is, I was screenshotting stuff on the movie Avatar. I haven't watched it forever. So I was like, well, the second one's coming out. I'm going to watch it. Well, I screenshot the inside of the mountain lab in the floating mountains that they go to, because it reminded me a lot of that's what it's going to be like inside of the habitats you're wanting to build, because it's roughly the same size. If you look at how they set up this in, these labs inside of these two container looking structures, and it's like, that's what it's going to be like. So I'll have to send it to you just so you can see what I was saying, but that's what it is. So, if you want to get an idea of the size of these things and what it would be like, watch the movie Avatar. There, James Cameron, I shot you a plug.
Yeah, I mean, obviously we got pictures that we're putting up here of these habitats as you're describing them and stuff along those lines, but pictures don't always do it justice. So,
right. To get myself kind of the idea, I have an uncle that I visited their place recently, and he had gotten a storage container and just used it as a storage shed sitting on his property. And so I was like, I want to get an idea, because I'm just not around that stuff enough. So I just walked out there and walked around it, walked into it, and was like, all right, now it's, now it's in my head, the physical 3D idea of what space there is to use. And
talking about the Conshelf would be 8.2 feet wide. You get in there, that's how wide a shipping container is. So how much. Yeah. There's more space than you think, but still, it's not huge.
Right. Inside a shipping container too, though, you don't have those rounded floors to deal with.
Right.
You have a squared off, so you have that space there that you wouldn't have had in that cylinder that they were in.
True. Yeah, very true.
But these guys stay that it was outfitted really well for such a small size, because it had a small library in it, bed, television, even radio, which in those days you think radio and television isn't anything like what we have now.
Yeah.
And to get that down to underwater, that was pretty amazing. So when I say all this about underwater, Jacques Cousteau had the Calypso, his ship, and that ship worked as the base station to provide all the needs to all the Conshelf projects. It was parked on the surface. It was the generator, the air supply, anything that was needed, the ship provided it. So know that too, because that has changed so much for what can be done these days with today's technology. Is just amazing.
Right.
Let me see here. Oh yeah. So we're talking size. I wrote down a note. Just most people don't realize in their houses and apartments how small your rooms actually are. And so take the measuring tape, measure it out. Unless you live in some loft apartment or something, some huge space, you'll be surprised at how big your rooms actually are, or how small in comparison to this. I have a good example. Is I have this little bathroom in my basement. It doesn't seem crowded in it, but I measured it out. It's only 4 feet wide. And I'm like, what? Yeah, it's like 7 foot long, but it's 4 feet wide. It's a little bathroom. It's a little basement bathroom. I never thought about it being crowded ever before, and I was like, wow, this would fit right into one of those. Wouldn't you think twice about it?
Yeah, when I was, back when I was designing, I'd be thinking out, okay, this, especially in the early days when I was designing, the habitat to be huge. I mean, massive. And so I'd be walking off. So I remember back in high school when I first thought of it, I was like, okay, it's going to be, this section here is going to be 50 foot long. So I was walking off 50 foot, and that's a pretty good size distance. So I was like, this thing's going to be huge. Yeah. And then I started looking at, okay, the room's going to be this big. So I started taping off like my bedroom in high school. So all right, this isn't that bad. In the bathroom, this isn't that big. So I'm like, this all can easily fit in here. So it's. Yeah.
And you, too many examples. I mean, one are your RVs and campers today.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you'll have more room in one of these than you do in most RVs and campers, unless it's one of those huge walk-in ones.
Right.
And even then, it's actually pretty comparable.
Yeah.
Minus the slide outs, but that's what you got your modules for different stuff in ASC's concept.
Yeah. I say for all these habitats though, and I think, but I think the one big thing with when we're talking about these habitats, and I don't want to get too much off the Conshelf discussion here, but everybody's like, okay, so it's the same size as an RV or a small, conversion or something along those lines. True. But with those, you can open up a door and walk outside, or you can open the windows and you get the fresh air. That's the difference between that and living underwater is you don't have that flexibility, So I think that psychologically comes into play.
Yes. Yeah, it does. But to me, that's why I liked, I know we're getting away from it again, but that's why I like your concept, because you can build in that stuff with your different module attachments. You can build in the idea of space, fresh air. There's so much can be done, that would keep you psychologically just fine with all that.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, again, I went back, I said how they were being studied, but they worked outside of that habitat for at least 5 hours a day. They were outside for at least 5 hours a day working. They did scientific observation of sea life. What do I got here? They built an underwater farm. And when they're inside the habitat, they're being watched by, says up to 30 people at a time. And they had their health checked daily. They went through a health check of some sort, a checklist of things that they did.
I mean, we look at that now, being able to go stay at Jules or, divers go down to Aquarius, along those lines. It's not a big deal. But back then, I mean, they're setting the precedence at that point in time. So they had no idea what this prolonged exposure, working outside all day, they coming inside and all that was going to do to them. So, I mean,
Yeah.
I'm sure they're being overly cautious, but at the same time, I think they're trying to get data off of it too.
They were, just because the oil, gas, minerals, the people that were backing them were looking at this as a way to be on the spot in the ocean and have people just like a mine, an above water mine would be running. This was their idea. They wanted to see if they could do that.
Yeah.
So, they were pushing what you were just saying. They're really wanting it watched and observed. So I made a note, just, it was like underwater Big Brother, because they were being watched all the time. Everything they did. The thing I didn't look into, which occurs to me now, is, and I bet it didn't have any kind of a head facility, a toilet facility inside of it.
Right. It would probably be similar to what they do with Aquarius.
Yeah. That's what I thought too. And of course, Prinal, it was all out,
Yeah.
You left the facility for any needs as far as that needed was.
Exactly. Which, I mean, it solves a big problem. I mean, what you do with the waste and stuff like that is one of the hardest things that we always talk about and trying to solve, because it is a massive understructure to, especially when pressure comes involved, is not getting that backflow in, for one thing, because you definitely don't want that, and then try and get it out there, and then getting it out there and not, in a controlled way too. So it makes sense.
I'm not condoning, pushing raw sewage, but at the same time, on a small scale, it doesn't hurt anything. They know that.
Yep.
But when you start large scale, then you're making big problems.
Yeah, exactly. So we can't have 100 people going out there under a little dome and using the bathroom out there. So
have like the Roman toilet facilities out in the street, No, I don't think so. But that was Conshelf 1. It was small. It was a start. It wasn't as small as Man and Sea. And, I know you have some pictures that you'll be able to attach.
Yeah. So
people can get an idea of just the inside, what it was, kind of looked like, which is pretty cool. We'll go on to Conshelf 2, and it'll show you where they went with the info they got from Conshelf 1. It kind of exploded.
Yeah. I think anybody who's watching this already knows enough about Conshelf 2 as far as images and stuff along those lines. So I'll be curious to see what you come up with for that one there. But yeah, I look forward to that one. So for anybody that's watching this, if you're catching this for the first time, hopefully the second one's uploaded by that point in time. If not, you'll have to wait and see what Babe's got in store for Conshelf 2. Thanks a lot, Babe. And thank you guys for watching.